This is the Pennsylvania Report with State Senator Sean Wiley. The Pennsylvania Report, a look at your state government working for the future of Erie County. Hi, thanks for joining us. We're talking with Senator Wiley about education and specifically about the Erie School District. And Senator, the Erie School District has some challenges and some financial problems that are not necessarily the norm for most school districts across the state. Why don't you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, we're facing a real difficult challenge in our school district in Erie. The funding that has been cut over the last 5 years to education has really had a negative impact on our school district. To the point where we've closed schools. There's been some very difficult decisions made on programs for our kids and teacher cuts. It's really been a very difficult time. Our school district faces significant challenges as far as the funding stream and how the funding formula works. There's a clear disparity in like-size school districts across the Commonwealth, and we're looking to see how we can address those. But we also have a significant investment that the school district makes in cyber and charter schools that is directly coming out of the funds for public education, which we have to really look and see how this funding mechanism and funding formula is working, and more importantly, how we can lessen that burden on our school districts. So the Erie School District right now, and Dr. Badams, our superintendent, are facing very monumental challenges to see how they can continue to provide a high level of service and high level of education to the kids with declining funding. So it was encouraging to see the budget proposal last year from the governor to increase funding for education, and we continue to fight for that throughout the impasse. But I have to say that we have to make some significant changes and systemic changes to the system and to the formula to really be able to address the needs of not only the Erie School District, but school districts across the Commonwealth.
Now, Superintendent Badam and yourself met with the governor recently to talk about this and to see where things could go from here. And we have a Q&A that we did with the superintendent right after that meeting, and we'll take a look at that tape right now to see how things went.
We were kindly granted the opportunity to present Erie School District's financial situation, and this is kind of above and beyond the budget impasse. This is sort of a structural underfunding, a chronic underfunding that we believe we've experienced in Erie, and sort of bears out the whole notion of a fair funding formula. We're a district that serves a very needy population, and yet in our own county we receive the least amount of per pupil funding.
And how do you think the presentation went? What sort of points did you make, and did they seem to score?
Well, the governor was actually already aware of our presentation and was very receptive to the facts and figures. He also shared with us that his concern is to make sure that we have fair funding for all of Pennsylvania's school districts, and so I thought that the meeting went quite well.
Is there another step that's involved now?
Sure, we're obviously all waiting to see what's going to happen with the 15-16 budget and the 16-17 budget, but in the meantime, we're obligated to pass a budget by June 30th, and so we're preparing right now for a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. In our best case scenario, with funding the way it is, we'll have to cut $4 million from our $180 million budget. That's in the best case scenario. In our worst case scenario, we'll have to cut approximately $10 million from our budget. We've already been cutting for the past 5 years, and we're just not sure what else we can sacrifice.
So some pretty grim statistics there, even after the meeting went well. Let's talk a little bit more about the funding formula. There was a commission that was to study the funding formula and how that money is distributed to school districts across the state. What was the result of that, and how would that help Erie?
Well, it was a bipartisan commission that was engaged, and the chairman was Senator Brown, and there were House members and senators on the commission. And they came out with the results of the commission were a fair funding formula that would increase funding for a lot of our more impoverished communities and more impoverished school districts. And they came up with a number of layers of ways to address the needs of the school districts in so many different ways, not just in basic ed funding, but also special ed funding and a number of others. So we just need to move forward on how we're going to engage and implement that formula. Dr. Badams mentioned about the $4 million in cuts in a best case scenario and a $10 million in cuts in a worst case scenario. This is a school district that has done everything they possibly can to become as efficient as they possibly can. I give Dr. Badams a significant amount of credit in really looking under every stone and addressing every sense of inefficiency to really become as lean as they possibly can. So this is a school district as a model that has done everything they possibly can, and unfortunately, just due to the formula on how schools are funded today, they are facing these monumental challenges.
Now, you had mentioned earlier about charter schools and other schools that sap some of the funding from the district. How does that happen?
Well, the school district, out of the school district funding, they have to participate with the cyber and charter schools. So the funding that is delivered to the public school system is divvied out to the charter schools when a student is attending a charter school.
I think the theory here is that the money follows the student wherever they go.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. And so what that is doing is it's depleting from the public school system and just continuing to draw from that system, which is another area that we really need to address. There has been a number of pieces of legislation that have been proposed to address how we're funding charter schools. We have two different elements there. We have the bricks and mortar charter schools, and then we have the cyber system. And it's not only the funding formula we have to address, but it's also the performance that we have to address as well. A number of our cyber schools across the Commonwealth are performing at a much lower level than our public school systems. And we need to address that. It's all about the education our kids are getting. It's not necessarily where they're getting it, but how they're getting it and how we're funding it.
And let's talk about the level of education with all those cuts, with all those cutbacks. What sort of education are the students of Erie getting?
It's a great question. When we were funding education in a responsible level prior to the 5-year cuts, our students were performing very, very well. Our scores were at a level that was average or above average across the country. And now when you are depleting funding from education, from public education, or pulling from public education in a number of different ways, we're finding that our students are not performing as well. So it doesn't take rocket science to really figure out exactly what we need to do. It's direct investment, accountability for the schools, and moving forward in a formula that really makes sense.
What sort of things then out of this meeting did you and Dr. Badams and the governor come up with as a game plan? Well,
the governor is, as Dr. Badams had mentioned, the governor is very interested in a comprehensive approach to addressing the needs of schools across the Commonwealth. He does understand the specific needs that Erie School District is facing. But we have to see, and again, we're really fighting for an increase in public education funding that would address this, but also in the funding formula. The governor is a supporter of the funding formula and the changes in the funding formula as well. So I think that the governor is really aware of exactly what the challenges are. He's been a strong proponent of increasing the investments that we're making in our students, and I think that that's the direction we need to go.
Just a couple of seconds left then. I guess a lot of it hinges on what the governor can do with his budget and specifically about education.
That's exactly correct. And I don't think that there's a legislator in the General Assembly today that does not want our students to get a good education. A budget process is a priority, and it's a moral obligation. And so when we're charged with addressing the needs of our students and investing in certain areas, it becomes a priority. And I believe that that's a significant area that we have to get better at.
Well, if you have any questions or any comments to make about what we were talking about today or anything, get a hold of the Senator on social media. All that information is at the bottom of your screen. A couple seconds will tell you how to get a hold of him at his district office. Thanks for watching.
People with disabilities may request a transcript of this program by calling area code 717-787-5166. The TTY number is 1-800-364-1581.